Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
Less than a month away from training camp beginning at Grand Park. I'm Kevin Bowen. Chris Presley is across the way. It is inching closer and closer. I always think to myself, July 4th, man, once that comes and goes, the NFL is just knocking on the door. Mm-hmm. And yesterday's announcement of the training camp schedule kind of inches us closer to that as well. So we'll hit on that on today's podcast. I do want to go over kind of my post-spring 53-man roster.
Okay.
I always enjoy the camp battles that come about from that. Obviously, you have some injuries that'll play into that. But I always enjoy looking at the roster exiting minicamp and then things to watch out for when Grand Park rolls around. We will not do a podcast next week. I'm going to be out of town next week, so I kind of figure let's just totally decompress from it. We'll come back with a few pods leading into Grand Park, and then here we go, man. Another season.
Nice little vacation for the Bowens.
Yeah, nothing too crazy. My wife's family do kind of an annual week up at their lake house in northern Indiana.
Yep.
So yeah, you've been up, I think, into that
I have.
Same area as well, so looking forward to that. And, yeah, how about you? You getting away at all this summer?
So I'm gonna go up to Lake Freeman up in Monticello.
Yeah, Indiana Beach, baby.
Yeah. So I'm gonna head up there this next weekend and kind of just decompress. I'm moving out today and tomorrow, which is always fun.
Boy. And just great weather to move out, yeah. Right?
That's the worst part about renting and moving in is typically you sign the lease, at least I have, in July. So that every year it's going to be like 92 degrees. You're just sweating your ass off. And
great workout if we're going to look at positives.
It is, yes. But
our AC unit broke on Monday, Chris, and I just thought to myself, if I just walk up and down these steps like 3 or 4 times, that'll be a workout for the week. So I just kind of did that. Carried Rosie a few times, got a good little body, and man, I didn't know I could sweat that much. So, well, good luck with that, and appreciate you making a little time for the pod today.
Absolutely.
Let's start with training camp.
Let's go for it.
Yesterday, July 27th to August 25th. My first impression was that's a little bit longer than they're usually up there. I mean, that's almost a month.
Right.
16 open practices. And basically, to kind of summarize when those practices are, 13 of them will fall on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So just look at the weeks from July 27th to August 25th, and there's a good bet they're going to practice on one of those Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, and they'll practice from like noon to 1:30. Now, this is a time change from previous years when they typically practice in the morning. I've said this many times, Chris, in this podcast. Internally, the Colts do not handle the offseason well. Clearly, their approach and their plan to start seasons is not effective. I look at this training camp schedule and think they're pushing practice to align a little bit more towards lunchtime or towards 1 o'clock, and you play how many of your games at 1 o'clock? Like, that just kind of makes sense to me. I get it. In the mornings, you want to get out of the heat maybe. Obviously, I would think lunchtime is a little bit more conducive to people maybe on their lunch breaks. And,
Yep.
I don't know, as much as fans probably don't want to hear this, I don't think that's the first thing being debated about when they're picking the practice time. I think the first thing they're thinking about is, all right, football operations staff, when do you want to ideally have practice? And then they think about other things after that. A night practice on Saturday, July 30th, that is a little bit unique as well, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Their only other weekend practice, which I did find a little bit odd. They're practicing. They have two weekends available until the preseason games. The first preseason game is August 13th. So July 30th and August 6th, are 2 open weekends. They're only practicing on 2 of those 4 days. So typically I would think you would want, again, if you want to be out in front of your fans, but that's just not how the practice schedule worked out. Basically, it's 3 days on, a day off, 3 days on, a day off. So It looks like a few more built-in off days, if I'm looking at this correctly.
Yep.
But yeah, Sunday, August 7th, 12 to 1:30, and then Saturday, July 30th, 7 to 8:30. Those are your weekend practices. Joint sessions with the Lions, August 17th and 18th. Those will be, again, in kind of that 12 to 1:30, 12 to 2 time slot. Chris, I absolutely love that the Colts go away for training camp. I love that they do it in front of their fans and do it for free. That is a rarity in today's NFL. So kudos to them for continuing to do that, because that has not been the trend in the NFL. Part of me always had kind of a little sentimental value to Anderson, even to Rose Holman. I was at Rose Holman just for a brief period. But I understand why they want to be a little bit more centrally located. Grand Park is an incredible venue as well. And when players do get a chance to have off days, off nights, whatever, they can obviously see their family in a much closer capacity than those other spots. So
Absolutely.
people can't get out there. I mean, I know the financial demand to go to a professional sporting event is immense. This is a great opportunity to see them up close. It's, like I said, free. I think autographs will be involved as well. So just a really cool chance for a month to see the Colts.
And our listeners will be able to find that schedule on Colts.com, I would imagine, correct?
Yep, I would hope someone from our website probably posted it to our website as well. I don't know that for sure. But, yeah, you can certainly find that over on Colts.com as well.
Always fun to get out there. And that's one of the great things about the way Chris Ballard drafts the character of the players. They come over after the practices. They sign autographs. They meet with the fans.
Yeah, they've kind of done it in a variety of ways. Some days just offense will sign. Some days just defense will sign. I think they switched to maybe like position groups would sign. So it can differ a little bit depending on what day you're there. But yeah, always really cool to see little kids and their faces light up when those players go over there and chat.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, as we approach the season, let's talk about the 53-man roster that you're projecting. Obviously, we're going to start at the top, a key piece that every team needs, and that's quarterback. What are you thinking about the quarterbacks that stay on this roster?
Yeah, I'm totally good with just the two obvious ones, Matt Ryan and Nick Foles. Their veteran experience speaks for themselves. Matt Ryan been incredibly durable. I don't look at Sam Ehlinger as a number 3 quarterback and think he is so important to the team you need to waste a roster spot. Waste might sound a little harsh, but I just don't look at him as like, boy, that's a third-round pick that you have an investment in and you really want to protect him there. I say slot him onto the practice squad, so I guess I'd be cutting Ehlinger and Jack Cohn and then signing Ehlinger to the practice squad.
Behind them, the running backs, there's also two obvious that we know are going to make the roster, but then another wrinkle that came in this offseason through free agency. Who do you think the 3 running backs will be?
That's a good question, Chris. I think this is one of those just kind of fringe battles. Keeping a 4th running back, again, a little bit luxury for me. A 3rd running back, though, Deion Jackson was that guy for long stretches last season, undrafted. Last year, the staff really likes him. Remember, Jordan Wilkins no longer here. Marlon Mack in Houston. So it will be a new face behind Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. I'll go with Phillip Lindsay. Tyshawn Williams, who came over from the Ravens in the offseason, he's a name to watch. A couple of undrafted guys as well. C.J. Verdell. Big Ten fans that watched that Ohio State-Oregon game from this past season will certainly remember him. Battled some injuries in his time at Oregon. So this is just always a battle that it won't get a lot of attention. It won't get a lot of headlines. You're one freak injury to Jonathan Taylor away from knowing that 3rd running back and knowing them a whole lot. So
right.
I'll go with Lindsey and just saying you were behind bad offensive lines in Houston and Miami last year, and you should be very grateful to be behind this offensive line. So I'll go with him to round out a 3-man running back group.
For more offensive skill players on the outside, obviously many questions we've had this offseason about who the wide receivers are going to be. I think that's something a lot of Colts Nation is going to be focused in on. Who are the receivers that we keep, and how many do you think we keep?
Obviously, plenty debate here, Chris. Michael Pittman, to me, lock. Alec Pierce, lock. A healthy Paris Campbell, lock. I think Ashton Doolin is a lock. So there's 4. Now what do you do with those last couple spots? The names that pop into my head: Kiki Kuti, DeMichael Harris, Desmond Patman, Mike Strawn. So I kind of look at a little bit flavor of the month. What do you want? How do you want to round out that group? Obviously, special teams has got to play into it. And that's where Mike Strawn was such a, again, liability sounds harsh, but that's kind of what he was last year on your roster. It's why he was such a healthy scratch a whole lot. I'll go with Strawn and Patman to fill out the room, but Kuti and Harris have different body types. Harris has a little bit of special teams background. So a lot of it, I think, will depend on what do you want skill set-wise, special teams-wise to round out that group. I might be too big with Patman and Strawn, rounding out that group. And also, a lot's going to depend on, can any of those four establish themselves as a wideout that's just too good and too important to you offensively to pass up on. But I think those first four names, Pittman, Pierce, Campbell, Doolin, in some order, that's pretty Sharpie marker. The rest of the group's really a bunch of undrafted guys. That's how I look at wideout with those 6 names.
Yeah, not trying to derail the podcast and get into questions before we get to Twitter questions, but this is just me personally. We wait into a couple weeks of training camp before we hear more buzz about potentially getting Julio Jones based off what we see from these guys that you've mentioned just now?
Yeah, honestly, Chris, I think when training camp gets underway, July 27th, you occasionally will see a veteran or two signed like the day or two before training camp starts. Like, all right, there's no point in signing them now. I mean, it's not like there's any mandatory activities here in June into July. So I think the next time you would hear a whisper of a veteran, if not that day or two before training camp, I think you're waiting at least a week or two into training camp.
Okay.
Based off, all right, the full pads have come on, and these guys can't break press, and these guys are really struggling to create separation, and or an injury happens. So Julio, and then is T.Y. Hilton, is he going to retire? Is he going to end up somewhere? That I think, even if there's no specific Colts interest anymore in that, I'm just kind of curious what happens to his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he does indeed retire at, what? I mean, he's right around our age. I mean, he's 32, 33,
I think 33,
something like that.
Yeah, somewhere. Another topic of interest that we've talked about, tight ends. We obviously went out and drafted one. Jack Doyle leaving, so we're trying to. I wouldn't say necessarily have a crutch for him, but when you lose a veteran like that, it's obviously going on to a new regime. What tight ends do we keep, and how many of those as well do you think we keep?
Yeah, I'm going to keep 4. And again, there could be a bit of a luxury, but I'll go with 4 here. Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, and Drew Ogletree. 6 wideouts, 3 running backs. You tend to group the skill players together in adding up your numbers. Again, special teams is going to be vital for the back end of the roster guys. I tend to think Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, and Kylan Granson are kind of in the lock category. And Ogletree, I thought had a flash or two. Again, overall, I was disappointed by the tight ends in the spring, but I thought Ogletree had a flash or two. So I think right now you've got room for both draft picks 2022 to complete this group.
Up front, I should say. Let's get in the trenches. The people that will be protecting Matt Ryan. Any offensive linemen that you think are going to surprise people, or do you think it's pretty much chalk in how we go about this season?
Yeah, I don't think it's too chalky. I'll go with 9. I know Ballard is a fan of keeping at least 9, potentially 10. The guys that, again, I think you just put in Sharpie, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, Danny Penter, Matt Pryor, Bernard Ryman. I'll round out the group with Will Fries, the 7th-round pick from last year. I think gives you a little bit of position flex. I think there's some talk. Could he be competing with Penter at right guard? What happens with the shakeout of the loser of the Pryor-Ryman battle at left tackle? Do they factor in a guard? The 9th guy, I'll go with undrafted. I should say Dennis Kelly, the veteran tackle they signed.
Yes.
In the spring. We didn't see him in the spring. Didn't look to be super, super banged up, but he didn't participate. I would assume he is kind of your first tackle. I still think you have room for one more, and that's where Ryan Vendemark, the undrafted kid out of UConn. That's where I'll throw a ninth spot in there. Jason Spriggs from IU, I think would be someone to keep an eye on. Has started in the NFL before, just came from Atlanta, ironically enough, this past season. So I think that's where I would look. Carter O'Donnell is another name of an undrafted guy from Canada a few years back who has kind of had a spot on the practice squad, but that's probably where I would go with the 9. Again, the last one on there, you could debate a little bit, but the top 7, 8, I feel pretty good about. It's just solidifying where exactly they fit. Any of them a starter, the backups, who's your swing tackle, who's your first reserve. If Pinter starts at right guard, is he your backup center still? Can Will Fries play center in a pinch? So I think there are a couple of questions there that you have to acknowledge.
All right, we did the offense. Let's jump to the counterparts, and let's start again in the trenches on the defensive line. Another thing that the Colts are looking at is we're trying to get pressure on the quarterbacks, and we know that we have some new acquisitions, and we have some young guys that are up and coming, at least hopefully. Who do you think we keep on the defensive line?
It's kind of an annual thing where the D-line group has a lot of guys that have some resume. They were drafted relatively high. They've been an important free agent signing, or at least a notable free agent signing. I'm going with 9 D linemen, 9 offensive linemen. I could, again, probably uptick this to 10. I know that seems a little rich, but we know what Ballard thinks of the trenches here. DeForest Buckner, Tyquan Lewis. Now, Lewis, is he a pup guy? We didn't see him in the spring. The patella injury, I don't think so, but that's something to keep an eye on. Yannick Ngakoue, Dayo Odeyingbo, Kwity Paye, Grover Stewart. I'll round out the group with your 2 draft picks from this past year, Curtis Brooks, Eric Johnson. The last name, I thought Chris Williams, a defensive tackle that has kind of been in the mix, but I'm going to go with, is it Afidi Odeyingbo, the other Odeyingbo they signed just a few weeks ago. I'll go with him to round out the group. Now, again, am I a hair thin at defensive tackle? That's a question that I'm asking myself. With this, I'm cutting Ben Banigou. So, Odeyingbo or Banigou, do you want more of an interior presence in Williams? Who can you sneak to the practice squad? Odeyingbo's a guy that has a little bit of a resume, and I do think kind of just a pure backup defensive end is not something the Colts definitely have. Again, Banigou hanging on by a thread. I mean, Odeyingbo just 3 years ago in Minnesota had 7 sacks. 2 years ago in Minnesota, he started 15 games. So, I mean, there is a nice resume there. So I'll go that route over Banigou and then opt for the edge guy over the interior option.
Okay. So, again, you can go to 1075thefan.com to read this article. We're going to work front to back on the defensive end. We just did defensive line. Let's go to linebackers. We obviously know about Darius Leonard, but clearly he's going to make the roster. What other linebackers are going to be joining him?
I'm a little small here. I'm going to go with 5 linebackers. Now, you'll notice I'm going to keep a lot in the secondary, so that's where I make up for it. And, part of the 5 linebackers is just, again, really only used 2 for long stretches on the field. So Darius Leonard, Bobby Okereke, Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed. I think that's rather obvious. The 5th name I'm going to keep, and I kept this guy right after the draft as well, and I liked what I saw in the spring, is JoJo Domann from Nebraska. A pretty good resume there at Nebraska. Former safety turned linebacker. And remember, Jordan Glasgow just got cut a few weeks back, been a special teamer out of Michigan. So you've got the need for a special teamer here. I know a lot of college football fans will recognize the name James Skalski from Clemson. Hard-nosed dude that, if you're in a bar, you make friends with him very quickly. Sterling Weatherford is the Cicero prospect, played at Miami, Ohio. Safety turned linebacker again. He's a name to keep an eye on as well. So I think this is where you've got room for the undrafted free agent to make the team, play special teams, and honestly dress. So, yeah.
On the outside, cornerbacks. We know a couple that we brought in. We know a couple that are going to be mainstays. There are a couple names that might not necessarily ring the bell of a lot of listeners because they're going to be new or somewhat new. Go ahead and tell us who you think we have at cornerback.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 6 corners here. Kenny Moore, Stephon Gilmore, obvious. Isaiah Rodgers, Brandon Faison, the new corner from the Raiders, falls into that. To round out the group, I would go with Tony Chesley, who played some snaps for this team last year. I know he wasn't maybe the most household name, but he was kind of that extra nickel corner that the Colts did have. This guy played more probably safety, Chris, in the spring than corner, but I'll put him here. That would be Rodney Thomas, the 7th-round pick out of Yale.
Okay.
Now, there are some other corners, I think, to watch that, again, not great household names, but if Gilmore's going to, be a little load management and we'll see what happens with Kenny come training camp. Some other guys could make an impression, but I'll go with those 6 there. I am cutting Marvell Tell for the 2nd straight year, but, he's definitely a name to keep an eye on.
Going to safeties, we obviously drafted Nick Cross. We got some good ones coming back. We had Kari Willis retire. Yeah. So who do you think we have back there on the back end?
Yeah, the last 53-man roster I did, Kari Willis was on the team. He obviously is not on it anymore. Right here, I'm keeping, I guess 5. Julian Blackman, of course.
Yes.
Nick Cross. Brandon King, I guess you call a safety. He's really here to play special teams. Rodney McLeod, as you mentioned, and then Armani Watts, who was one of the earlier free agent signings, came over from Kansas City. So when you look at those numbers there, you probably have a number to play with somewhere. Is it that extra linebacker gets you to 6? Is it another body in the trenches that gets you to 10? That's probably the 2 areas that I'm looking for, an extra linebacker or an extra O-line or D lineman there. But, yeah, safety-wise, you don't have a ton on the roster right now. I think Trevor Denbo, if I'm not mistaken, undrafted guy, is the only one I'd be cutting. Again, Rodney Thomas could fit in here out of Yale, who has some position flexibility as well.
Yep.
So I think those are some things to keep an eye on in the secondary.
And we're going to round things out with what has probably been one of the better groups collectively the last couple years for the Colts, and that's the specialist, who is going to be our kicker, long snapper, and punter.
Yeah, obviously Luke Rhodes, Rigoberto Sanchez, and then right now Jake Verity is the competition for Rodrigo Blankenship. If you are in the Blankenship family, you are very happy about that. I looked up Verity's stats at East Carolina. He was undrafted 2 years ago, was on the Ravens practice squad this past year. From longer than 40 yards, Chris, he was 23 of 39. That's not great. And that would be the one area that you would want to kind of upgrade from with Hot Rod.
Yeah. You want a leg.
And remember last year, Rodrigo Blankenship against Eddie Pinheiro, neither dude missed a kick at Grand Park. So I'm expecting Hot Rod to have a nice, camp in preseason. Yet it's just it's going to be the elephant in the room when you get into the season there. Michael Badgley didn't miss a single extra point in 12 games, 18 to 21 on field goals. I probably would have gone that route. And as we know with kicker, Chris, you see it every year. Late August, 2 or 3 kickers that kick really well in a spot go get a job in another spot. So
Correct.
I don't know. Maybe the Colts explore that route. But, yeah.
All right, well, that's a 53-man roster. Anything else you want to add to that before we get to Twitter questions?
No, again, that's something that, cuts, they're continuing to do it a little by little, and they've moved the cuts up to those Tuesdays. So the first cut gets down to, I think it's 85 on August 16th. You get down to 80 the next week on August 23rd, and then the final cut comes just after that last preseason game. The Colts preseason schedule at Buffalo, home to Detroit, home to Tampa. That Tampa game is August 27th. You make a cut to 53 3 days later on Tuesday, August 30th.
Okay.
So those are the dates to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and as always, continue to follow Kevin. He will have everything posted for you, 1075thefan.com as well, and listen to the morning show if you were here local. Let's jump to Twitter questions. The first one, Kevin, is coming from Finland.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
And this is Henrik, who is a listener to the show.
Henrik, great to hear from you, man. Thank you for sending.
Says the situations in the Colts pass rush is looking good at the moment. That being said, it seems that people don't have much expectations for Dayo Odeyingbo, or at least everyone is staying very quiet about him. We all knew that he wouldn't produce much in his first year because of the injury. Now that he is healthy, should we expect him to be a more important part of the defensive line? And also, Kevin, what do you think his expectations are this season?
Yeah, Henrik, terrific question. With Odeyingbo, Chris, you kind of look at it and think, all right, injury, Achilles hampered him big time last season. Is this his rookie year in a way? Should they have more expectation? Because, he did get about half the season run in last season. With Odeyingbo, I look at his role as this. Not a definite starter in your base defense. Yannick Ngakoue and Kwity Paye at DNs, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner at defensive tackle. I look at Odeyingbo as a guy that rotates in on passing downs. You're taking Grover Stewart off the field. You're bringing Odeyingbo on the field. And really, when you look at that four-man group in that IndyCar package, Ngakoue, Paye, Buckner, you would think Odeyingbo's going to get a lot of one-on-one chances.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to feel more comfortable, more confident, obviously, in his body. He said from a flexibility standpoint, he would watch himself on film and think, oh, boy, what is going on from last year? So, Chris Ballard, Dayo Odeyingbo, Chris Ballard, infatuated with Dayo Odeyingbo. I mean, that is right up there, maybe at the top of draft picks Chris Ballard is loved. So he's going to get chances. He's going to benefit from other guys getting more attention. If you're going to make a depth chart, probably not a starter, but again, just being versatile.
This one comes from Brian. Gus Bradley worries me a bit about defensive coordinator. He thinks that he's going to be very similar to Matt Eberflus and not very aggressive. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, Brian, I think this is one of the questions I have defensively entering the season. If you listen to Colts players talk throughout the spring period, Chris, what you heard from them, the word that you heard a lot was simple. Not a word you love, Now, it is year one of the system. You can't overload too much. But, what do you do disguising pre-snap? I think that is something that I saw a little bit in the spring. Do you see some of that? Blitzing is not going to be abundant. It has never been kind of his MO. The cover three is going to be something that you see a lot. What I like with Bradley, again, is just that at each level, Chris, it's new position coaches, it's a new coordinator, and I think more of that, to me, has to do with game planning. And just, do you get some fresh thoughts, philosophy in that room? Again, you might not be crazy exotic on Sundays, but do you have a game plan, and are you willing to counter a little bit earlier in games? I felt like the Colts got too stubborn at times, and that hurt them on the defensive side of the ball. So, I want to try and make it clear kind of where things are expectation-wise defensively. Do not expect, Baltimore Raven type absurd, blitz until, the cows come home, that sort of thing. But I do think there will be some things differently that you like, the press coverage stuff, those sorts of things.
Another big defensive name that's out there that Adam wants to know about, do you think the Colts would sign Ndamukong Suh for a cheap one-year deal?
I do not, Adam. Ndamukong Suh wants to play, and he wants to play a lot. So I would assume he will wait for an injury or something like that to develop at training camp before that move. I mean, we just talked about Dayo Odeyingbo, Chris. Like, where? Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner is a duo the Colts really like, and they should like, and they have invested in both of those guys. So I do not see that happening.
Well, Kevin, we always love a projection question, especially as we go into the year. This one comes from Paul. If the Colts offense explodes this year and Jonathan Taylor has 2,000 yards rushing, Naheem Hines and Michael Pittman Jr. have 1,000 yards receiving, how many yards does a healthy all-year Paris Campbell have? So 2,000 yards for Jonathan Taylor, 1,000 yards apiece for Hines and Pittman.
Wow.
Where's Campbell falling in there?
Holy shnikes, that's a lot of yards,
That's a lot of yards. Yeah.
Well, Chris, has an NFL team ever done that? Because that's the first thing that kind of pops into my head. I mean, 2,000 yards rushing in a season.
Yeah, if you're going 2,000, that's the one that's going to put you over the top.
Chris just pulled it up, all right? How
Okay.
many times do you think in NFL history someone has had over 2,000 yards rushing in a season?
I'm going to say 4.
8 times
Okay.
it has been done. The latest being Derrick Henry in 2020, Adrian Peterson 2012, Chris Johnson 2009, Jamal Lewis. Shout out to Jamal Lewis. He looks like he liked a pizza or two in his day.
He's a Vol.
2003. Yeah, Vol. Great point on that. Chris, again, 8 times in NFL history, I'd be willing to bet that team did not have 1,000-yard receivers to go with that. So,
Correct.
Paul, to your point, I think that is borderline impossible. I love the projections. I love the thought, but I don't see that being realistic. Under your scenario, Paris Campbell would have, 300 yards?
Yeah.
I don't. Boy, Nyheim Hines having 1,000 yards as a receiver.
Yeah, if I could take the 200 and both 100s, I don't care what Paris Campbell really does for me. 200 to 300 yards,
right.
We should be good, right?
Yeah.
Always love the great names that we get here on Twitter. This is Pumpkin Pastry.
I do love that. Now, pastries intimidate me. I don't like to go to restaurants that are like, yeah, we have a pastry slice.
You think it's too fancy of a word?
Yeah, look at me. I just want a donut, dude. Chocolate chip cookie?
Right.
Hello? Don't pastry me? No, I don't. No.
It's a cafe type of word.
Too high end for me.
So it says, first, fully agree with you on the need to keep draft capital for a future pick at quarterback. However, counter argument for keeping a first-round pick for next year's draft, 5 NFL teams have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft. Those will be the Eagles, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Texans, and the Lions. This doesn't include the fact that Atlanta will have a top 3 pick and also needs a quarterback. This means 4 of 6 teams with more draft capital and a high need for a quarterback will have their pick of the quarterback litter in next year's draft. So knowing that we won't be able to draft a top 5 quarterback next year, does that change your stance in going after Scary Terry?
Well, obviously we saw Terry McLaurin sign the extension, but I think there's a lot of relevance to this question outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, he points out some really interesting points about those teams having multiple first-round picks, and think about how quarterback hungry those teams are. Seattle, Houston, Detroit. What happens with Tua and Miami? I mean, that is. I hate kicking it down the road, but it further kind of reiterates the point that I've made of just like when you give up a draft pick in future years, and I get it. Kari Willis whispers and Nick Cross and all that, but you're competing with some other teams that really need a quarterback, and it's not just a guarantee of like, oh, yeah, we're good. The Colts will get their quarterback next year. Well, there's other teams that want that quarterback, and it's the whole debate on, and I know I want this to sound serious. I know it won't, but it's like, oh, yeah, just trade back every year, and you'll collect draft picks for Arch Manning. The team that's drafting number 1 overall that year is probably going to want Arch Manning or insert whoever quarterback is the quarterback in 2026. It's no guarantee that you're just going to be able to trade up and be like, yep, I want the guy and I'm going to get the guy. That's just not how feasible it is. Chris, the Colts, I think, they're in an interesting spot where you don't see this very often, where a team is super old at starting quarterback and pretty old at the backup quarterback spot and doesn't have the young quarterback intrigue in the room. I mean, think about it. They're, 37 years old in Ryan, 33 years old in Foles, and then 6th-round pick, low ceiling Sam Ehlinger, and undrafted free agent Jack Cohn, who is very much a finished project in his skill set. It's an interesting quarterback room. It is. Pros and cons wise, I think you can make that case. The con being, again, what is the young piece in there?
Yeah.
The pro being vast experience, professionalism, mental makeup, all of those things.
Well, Kevin, this fall, Smooth Smith has himself quite a let's call it a vacation. I would call it a vacation. Road trip for sure.
Okay.
Lives in Delaware, but he's traveling to Indy for the Sunday game versus Washington.
All right,
Then-
Tartt Glen Hall, Ring of Honor game.
Yes,
425er, right?
that's right. 425. Then he's going to Cleveland to watch the Bengals and the Browns on Monday Night Football the next day.
Wow.
Makes sense.
That's a weekend.
Yeah. His question is, what landmarks and cool places should he visit while he's in Indy? Thanks again for the great coverage.
Well, Smooth Smith, the first thing that just popped in my head is on your way to Cincinnati. It's not ideally kind of on your way, but you can make it work. Go see Hoosier Gym. Go see where Hoosiers was shot.
Yes. Coming through 70. Yep.
Yeah. Again, that's not 74, but, you can kind of make it work there a little bit. So I think I'd do that. Chris, feel free to chime in. You are a frequent visitor of downtown. The Mass Ave area will be very popular, I think, to visit, depending on when you get into town. The northern part, the Bottle Works region of Mass Ave, the Pins, that little bar area is kind of a cool spot. I just think if it's nice, walking on the canal is something that I would do, a little bit more stadium-centric. So those would be some spots. I think if you're coming in at that point, you could maybe time up an NBA game. That's late October, right? Doesn't the NBA typically start like mid-October?
Yes. Yeah.
So you could do that. I'm sure there will be some Halloween-centric stuff as well.
How out of the way? I mean, you've been there. I've not. How out of the way would Canton be for him to stop and see the NFL Hall of Fame?
Yeah, that'd be impossible. Canton is uber north.
Uber north. Okay.
Yeah. So.
But I had what you had. Obviously, Monument Circle, which is where we record, right downtown. You want to see the heart of the city. The War Memorial's nice. You mentioned the canal. The the Art Museum is a great place to visit.
I was gonna say, Google some indie museums. There's different flavors for what you want. Will that Back Nine Entertainment be open? That's a little bit further away. That kind of Top Golf-y thing.
I'm not sure if that's going to be open at that point or not.
Maybe check that out. Again, that's something you can do in a lot of different cities, so it might not be indie-centric. But I'd look there. And Cincinnati, I'd get down to Cincinnati. I'm thinking here, I do Hoosier Gym early in the morning if you can. Get down to Cincinnati because I love that area around the stadium. And if it's a nice Monday night, that place can be rocking. And it's Bengals-Browns, so you're going to see some things, which that would entice me as well.
And when you're down in Cincinnati, you don't have to stay on the Ohio side. You can go across to Covington on the Kentucky side.
Newport, great aquarium.
Yeah, so there's a lot down there as well. They've done a really good job of building up both parts of the river down there. So, yeah, lots of good things you're going to see.
That's a great trip. I love that.
Yeah, just park and get out and walk, really, honestly. You will find something within 3 to 4 blocks no matter what city you're in.
The walkability of those two cities, terrific.
Yeah.
So, Ryan Geis in Cincinnati, I did my bachelor party there.
Yep.
Lost a lot of money, Jack's Casino. Let me know if you find any of that. Smooth Smith, I would appreciate that.
All right, the last question, Kevin, is going to be a fun one for us, as we always try to round out the podcast with a fun question. This one's from Tanner. If you had to put a 5-man zombie apocalypse team together, who would you put there? Coaches and front office personnel can also be included. These are his picks. Quentin Nelson, brute strength. Ryman, military, some survival knowledge maybe. Jeez. Isaiah Rodgers with the speed and stature. Michael Pittman, he can provide food. And Frank Reich can scheme and prep. Honorable mention is Jim Irsay because you got to think that he's got a secret bunker somewhere.
Oh, my gosh. Tanner. This is outstanding. Chris, I'm reading off his reasons and the people, and I'm like, wow, they all make sense to me. I almost don't want to change anything.
I got some changes.
Okay, you have some changes. Feel free to chime in. Kenny Moore is a guy that I would like. I know Isaiah Rodgers makes sense. Kenny Moore or Nyheim Hines, I'd like to insert somewhere there.
Yep.
What were your thoughts on that?
So I'll go first, and then I'll let you follow up. I went Irsay because of the bunker. I went Kenny.
Can you imagine what his bunker looks like?
It's probably full of like Beatles pianos
and
stuff like that.
All right, if you know Bob Dylan's lyrics, that's the password.
Irsay with the bunker, Kenny Moore because he can do almost anything. Buckner because if someone's coming through the door, I want a big guy.
Smart.
Big, strong guy. Bobby Okereke was an Eagle Scout.
Oh, wow. You really did some research.
Yeah, so I want Bobby Okereke. And Braden Smith, if you ever follow him on Twitter, he loves to do gardening and also likes to fish.
He might be over Michael Pittman in your outdoors item there. All of those are outstanding.
And I got some of those. I'm not going to lie. Those weren't all me. Called our good friend Casey Valier at the Colts. I said, hey, you know more about the guys in the building than I do. Give me a list of some players here.
That does not surprise me. Casey on it, as always there. That is what a great offseason question. I like the zombie apocalypse. We've had like the wrestling ones or a little bit UFC type stuff, but the zombie apocalypse is a little bit different. All right, is that it?
That's all we got, yeah.
I'm Kevin Bowen. He is Chris Presley. Everybody have a great 4th. Safe 4th of July, a lot of travel. Stay cool. Enjoy the vacation time if you're able to get it this summer. And like I said, we'll take next week off from the pod. We'll come back that week of July 11th and continue right into training camp. And then it all begins July 27th at Grand Park. He's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week, great 4th of July, and we'll talk to you a little bit later this summer. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.